and welcome everyone to today's very special stream. Today's special guest is a genuine liberalist. And I think he's the king of the liberalist right now because nobody else actually wants to go on debates with the right wing. So
Man,
hardcore. Yeah, how about you introduce yourselves?
I'm hardcore. I make videos and I am trying to help make something bigger than myself right now, but very difficult.
Yeah, and for tonight, we're going to have discussion versus him. He agreed to it, so it's all going to be fair. It's going to be 2 versus 1. Both me and Joachim trying to deconstruct and destroy the liberalist rhetoric and foundation.
I came here to chew bubblegum and kick liberalist ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
You said
Okay.
my bad.
So, Hardcore, do you want to start off first and introduce your ideology?
Well, basically, the ideology started whenever Sargon of Akkad went and suggested that people who were left-leaning, who didn't associate with progressivism, and who value things like freedom of speech and other classical liberal values had a common platform. And basically what has happened now is that we're at the formation phase to where everybody's kind of getting together and deciding who wants to be what. And it's basically based around the idea that places that don't have liberal values and liberal freedoms get them. You know, like the UK doesn't actually have the right to freedom of speech. That's ridiculous. This is, I mean, how can you say that you're a civilized nation if you don't even have freedom of speech? It's basically just a group of people who want to promote freedom without having a specific political tie.
So you're a political group without an ideology. You're a collective of individualists.
I think.
Yeah, you're saying is that your only basis, the entire core of your ideology is free speech, and that's it.
Well, no, it's not free speech. We have like, as of right now, we have like, I want to say 7 different key tenets. And do you want me to read them to you?
Yeah, if you could, I would be interested in hearing them.
I'll bring them up.
Well, if you don't have them ready, I do want to mention a few things just while we're on the topic of it before we get too really deep into the meat and bones of it. Okay. But I think that a lot of people watched the V versus Medicare stream this morning. I did. It was highly amusing. And I think that everyone who saw at the end there that V was literally dethroned as king of the liberalists by his own chair, which now has a record of 1-0 in the Kumite. So props to chair for that. But I did find it fascinating that he kept deflecting from Medicare, trying to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't provoke people who get off on destroying lives and, quit picking fights with like lolcow boards. And then he kept trying to go into, well, here's why my ideology is great, in a way that I don't think really convinced anyone watching who wasn't already completely sold on the liberalistisms. So, I mean, what did you think of the V stream? Do you think that there was anything positive that came out of it for you guys?
I didn't watch it. I've been busy all day.
Do you think that V is a better representative of your movement than Sargon was?
I've thought about it a lot, and it's weird because at this point there's kind of a disconnect between like them and the people who are YouTube people and the people who are like just like the Facebook group, the Discord, things like that. They're all at this point disconnected, and for the most part, I don't really consider Sargon to be the leader so much as he was kind of our Benjamin Franklin, in the idea that he has good ideas and he is good with saying flowery words, but whenever it comes down to going up against somebody who doesn't give a crap about respect and doesn't give him the dignity,
the respect that he's owed as the stepfather of the movement.
Well, no, not so much. It's one of the things that I noticed in this first debate with Spencer is that he would make a valid point, and then Spencer would sit there and go, "What?" and just really disingenuously act like he didn't know what he was talking about. And Sargon just doesn't know how to deal with that. He's so used to people going, okay, and having kind of this honest debate. He really wasn't ready for Bloodsports.
Well, now hang on, because I mean I've seen the three big Sargon streams, right? The original one with Spencer, the one with Anglin, and then I guess just the two that really mattered. But in both of those, he came off to me at least as incredibly disingenuous in how he would argue. I mean, on the Anglin one, he came in, oh well, I wasn't expecting a debate, and then he tried to accuse Worski of being a liar, and Worski had to bring out like proof to show that no, you did agree to a debate at some point with a rematch with Richard. And then, oh, I'm not here to debate. But I mean, God, you're not advocating for full-on genocide, Andrew. I'm so disappointed in you. You're cucking. I mean, does that not strike you at all as disingenuous?
I don't know. It's weird. It's weird because of the fact that it seems to me like whenever it comes across as disingenuous, I always feel like that's one of those different perspective types things. Because like on the first Richard Spencer whatever feed, I noticed that they got hung up on the "what is white" question, right? Which it seemed like it was on y'all's or whatever vague side, whoever was on.
The alt-right. You can use the term alt-right. It's okay. It doesn't hurt my feelings.
Well, I don't want. Yeah, you're right. All right. So, but it seemed like he didn't want to acknowledge that that's a valid question. And because
it isn't a valid fucking question. I'm sorry. This drives me crazy, just like it drives Enoch and a lot of these guys crazy. Because we get asked this all the time, and it's almost always brought up in a disingenuous sense. The moment you try to defend whiteness, some asshole's like, "But white's not really a thing." And I mean, despite all the evidence to the contrary, lost in this Talmudic pill pull, that I can see why it gets frustrating when you go to a guy like Sargon, who I'll admit that Sargon has decently high IQ, and it's like, okay, guy, you know that white's a thing. You're just trying to deny it. And this is why I keep using the term disingenuous.
I think you're misinterpreting what the argument is. It's not that white isn't a thing. It's that it's so many things, and it could be interpreted in so many ways that whose interpretation is the best interpretation. So a good example is there's going to be some people in your movement who don't hate Jews. There's going to be some people in your movement.
Not my movement, because I believe that fundamentally central to the alt-right, as defined in Anglin's manifesto on it, which I won't say that Anglin's a leader, but I would say his manifesto on the alt-right is probably the most accurate written description someone has had. Foundational to the alt-right is anti-Semitism or counter-Semitism.
I can actually answer your concern about there not being an exact definition of white. Thing is, you're correct. There are many different definitions of white depending on who you ask. But what matters is the definition that the eventual state uses. Every state or central authority or culture generally has a main standard to go by. Just like countries have a set of laws. So an ethno-state would also have a specific set of who counts as white and who is not, and that's the one that will matter.
But the problem becomes whenever you make those guidelines, you're going to lose a percentage of your whatevers. And then in a couple of generations, anything that you impose is going to be dismantled by the liberal aspect of whatever generations are in the future.
So is this the core tenet of liberalistism then, that white is not really a thing? Because that's all I've gotten out of you so far.
You don't I mean, if you think that one of the hugest differences between the alt-right and the liberalist is the validation of race as an issue whenever it comes to making political or sociological or cultural decisions.
Yes, because we don't deny science. We do believe that science is something that actually has objective reality. You guys just deny
that most of the stuff that you say is science isn't science.
So like the differences between different phenotypes, that doesn't really exist. The heritability of IQ is just bad science. It's like global warming.
I'm saying IQ isn't because the problem is that it goes back to the same argument that Kathy Newman and Big Daddy Peterson had whenever she was trying to make it a one issue subject. And he was telling you that there's multivariant reasons why things like that happen. If you take Snoop Dogg's kid or Will Smith's kid or whoever, and you put them in a situation, and then you have the kids that grew up like in the bad part of town where I lived at, you're going to have drastically different people with drastically different IQs and drastically different, lives. So,
well, the IQ is largely, and I mean, there's science out there that's saying the majority of IQ is determined by genetics. I won't deny that does have some factor on outcomes, but I mean, once you hit adulthood, it basically all that kind of stuff boils away in terms of the outcomes for IQ. And also, I mean, are you really denying that there is like a biological difference between somebody from, Poland and somebody who's an Aboriginal Australian? I mean,
No, I'm
there's
not denying that
phenotypical
at all. There
differences.
is, there is a biological difference, but what the argument is whether or not it means anything, whether or not it's valid to sit there and say that somebody who has a 90 IQ has less of a say in life than somebody who has an 140 IQ.
Well, I wouldn't
Hardcore.
even argue that IQ is necessarily all that important, but the tribes exist, right? That you could look at somebody's genes, you could genetically sample them and say, oh, hey, this person is 3/4 Polish and 1/4 Irish, because you can see that. I mean, they have whole companies that are based around the idea that it's possible to do that now.
Hardcore, I have a question. Is there a
Right.
difference between men and women?
Yes,
Oh, why do you assume that?
because genetically there's difference. There's so many differences between women. Even like sociologically, there's difference between women. Even if you go back to the whatever the Swedish, Norwegian, or whatever gender paradox, the more you make things the same, the more the differences in the gender, and there's many multivariant differences in the genders. So to sit there and say that one tiny thing like melanin is a factor,
Hardcore. It's not just melanin. I mean, you should know that.
well, let me ask you a question. If you were sitting there and you were saying that to have a successful society, you need to have people of all shapes and sizes, because there's going to be people who need to do the manual labor. There's going to be people who do other things other than be smart and, solve math problems. See, because IQ is really, 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 really unimportant to a lot of different things. Like in a fist fight, the thing is that
You're making an argument. You just distracted yourself onto another thing. Now you're on a bird walk and you're filibustering.
No. I'm not like a fist fight. I'm saying that if you're sitting here and you're saying that the only thing that matters is IQ, then that's ridiculous.
No, what I'm saying
I don't think he did
matters
say
is
that.
race. I'm not saying that IQ is the only thing that matters. I'm saying that race is the only thing that matters. If the roles were reversed and whites had an average of 90 IQ and Africans Americans had a 110 IQ, I would still argue for the white ethno state because I'm white, because that is my tribal heritage. That's my people.
Yeah, I have a way to clarify this up. So instead of whenever Joachim says race, pretend he just says genetics. I think they'll probably serve your
phenotypical group, whatever.
Yeah. So
okay.
the genetics
But
matter.
all right. So, but this is the difference. Okay, if you're sitting here and you're saying that the first generation, okay, you're sitting here and you're saying you want to establish a small plot of land where people who
or America as a white ethno state. I don't want to establish anything. I'm not freeholding. I'm restoring what previously was.
Okay, but that's probably not ever going to happen.
Well, I think your ideas are equally implausible from my point of view, so let's just throw that argument out the window.
Well, my ideas have already been implemented in America. You see, I brought up the hold on, let me bring up
cultural Marxism.
It isn't cultural. How are we cultural Marxists?
You're denying the basic biological reality that there is a difference between people of different phenotypical groups. If you don't want to use the word race, I mean, you're literally subscribing to pseudoscience and calling me ignorant.
By saying that it doesn't matter, I'm denying the difference. That's retarded.
You absolutely are denying that. I mean, do you agree that there is a difference between the races?
How is saying that it doesn't matter denying that there is difference?
Because you're denying the practical reality of it, because it absolutely does matter, and everybody operates on that exception except for white Americans.
It's an ignorant argument because it doesn't account for the idea that there are multiple variables in any fucking equation.
When you have to fill out government paperwork that asks you for your identity, do you just choose not to identify your ethnic group or your racial group on there because of your liberalism, or do you mark down something?
All right. I don't understand why you keep on projecting these like false things onto the group. Is that how you think you're going to win this? Is by strawmanning me to death?
Well, I'm not strawmanning. I'm just asking an honest question. Do you identify as some sort of ethnic group or race?
You're phrasing it in a way to where it makes
you spent 10 minutes strawmanning me, and you accuse me of strawmanning you. That's literally strawmanning.
In fact, I actually said I don't want to sit there and assume that this is your beliefs. So
okay, because I mean, we were trying to get into what liberalistism is, and then you had to bring up the.
Well, here's the core tenets right here. You want them?
Sure.
All right. So there's individual rights, freedom of speech, blind justice, secularism, economic freedom, self-reliance, and democracy.
So just to make sure,
Wow, that's all so vague.
just making
It
sure
may be-
you're
so-
following
so,
the ones on the liberalist.org website, right? Principles, that one. So just can follow along. Is that the ones you
Yeah,
use?
that's the ones on theliberalist.org, I think.
Really
So
groundbreaking
blind-
stuff.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying that's really groundbreaking stuff.
It's not actually. It's very basic stuff. That's what the point is because there are places in the world who don't have free speech. There are places in the world who don't have blind justice. There's places in the world where you could get raped and you need 2 witnesses in order to not get stoned to death.
So you're arguing that, I mean, because it sounds to me like you're arguing George W. Bush's foreign policy is your entire political ideology, that we need to be this crusader for basic bitch. Oh, we need to go to implement democracy in the Islamic world. I'm assuming that this goes along the lines with Sargon saying we need to, basically bring back British imperialism, cultural imperialism, and that we should liberate all the world and make it free for democracy.
I think that even goes back to the Wilsonian make the world safer democracy doctrine.
I mean, first of all, I don't think it goes back. It's not a political movement. It's just
Then why does it have a manifesto if it's not a political movement?
because you need to.
Are you guys planning on mailing bombs to like professors?
All agree on the principles. That's why we are a collective of individualists and not a collectivist.
Can I ask you a question, Hardcore?
Yeah.
What do you see as the difference between a cultural and a political movement?
I would say that a political movement focuses on actually vying for political power. So in my mind, and there's some people who disagree with me, as you know, with y'all in the alt-right or whatever, there won't be ever a liberalist political person. Like there won't be a liberalist president, but there will be people who espouse liberalist values, who the people who are in the liberalists who will vote for and who will advocate for.
So
okay,
don't
you see
engage in
just
political advocacy is what you're saying.
Hmm?
You do plan on advocating politically for things then, yes?
Well, yeah, because you can't change anything without backing certain candidates or whatever, but it's not.
This is
like-
why I find your whole thing to be
Here's
so
an example.
fundamentally disingenuous, because it's like pulling fucking teeth to get you to admit that there's any politics.
In America,
yeah, you just backpedaled hardcore. You got
no. Here's an example. In America, let's say that for one term, there is a person who is a Republican who meets the liberalist values. And then in the next term, there's a person who's a Democrat who meets the liberalist values. They are going to vote whatever way that meets the values and not that meets the political party, whatever, blah, 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 blah.
But it's not a political movement.
It's not a political movement. I see. That's the weird thing about you is that you keep on pretending like being a person means that you are political.
Yes, man is a political animal, to quote Aristotle.
That's
Yeah,
retarded.
I would agree with that.
That's literally foundational to Western civilization.
What the fuck is a normie then?
Normies still vote. I mean, you have democracy as one. No, you have democracy. Can I talk real quick? You have democracy listed as one of your core values, and yet you're denying that man is a political animal. The idea of democracy is that there's an informed citizenry where everyone is political and everyone is involved in the political decision-making process. That's what it's like to live in a democracy.
Yeah, unless you want to live like I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be moderating.
Yeah, just hang back. I want to hear his response on that.
No, the point is once again, if you're sitting here saying that there's going to be a state that has these as its core tenets, that will never happen. But it's more like a reactionary to things that aren't this. So in places where there isn't freedom of speech, we're going to go there and try to move for freedom of speech. In places where
they don't want freedom of speech, are you going to impose it on them against their will? I mean, you say you want democracy. There's plenty of places in the world that don't want freedom of speech.
There's, like I said before, you keep on talking about imposing. You would have to actually be in control in order for that to happen. The only person who could impose it is the person who the liberalists end up supporting.
Okay, well, the country that you live in right now doesn't have an issue with any of those things that you've listed, right? There's none of those 7 core tenets of your ideology that are being violated by America, right?
America's kind of all the Americans in this movement are kind of appropriating it, honestly. I'm not going to even lie about that because
is that a serious claim?
No, seriously. I honestly.
What do you mean by everyone who's an American is appropriating the movement? Now I'm just curious.
To the extent that this is a UK-based movement based on problems in the UK and extended to an international movement. And most of the things that are in the tenets are already established in America. So for the most part, the same things that the founding fathers were trying to establish with America, the liberalists are trying to establish in places that don't have those fundamental rights. Like even Canada doesn't have free speech.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you have the right in Canada to get oral sex from your dog, so there's that.
But here's the
Hang
other
on,
thing.
I think ANCAP had a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, hardcore. So you're saying it's not a political movement, but all of these principles that the liberals believe in need government enforcement in order to happen.
Right.
And what you seem to be suggesting, sorry, which ones?
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So if you're saying you're a cultural, not political, but obviously what you're expecting to do is change the culture, so eventually it will lead to political change. So you are, in effect, a political movement.
In a trickle down effect, yeah, sort of.
Because politics is downstream of culture. Okay, let me give you a counterfactual, because you seem to be going on about how revolutionary.
Wait. Let him respond.
Go ahead.
I mean, honestly, whenever I thought it, that's exactly right. Culture is downstream from, politics. So if you change the culture, you inevitably change the politics. And that's the thing is that there are going to be people who inherently have liberalist values who are alt-right. But the difference between the alt-right and the liberalists, and a lot of people, most people aren't Joaquin. I mean, Joaquin. Is it Joaquin?
Doesn't really matter.
Okay. Most people aren't you. The one thing that the alt-right does not have is a core set of tenets. And I know you think
they absolutely do.
But there are a lot of people.
I'll give them to you right now. Here's the core tenets of the alt-right.
What about the Aryan Circle? What about the KKK? What about
those are white nationalist 1.0 movements?
Yeah, but they don't agree with your idea of whatever.
They're a constituent group. Okay, so here's the thing about the alt-right. For the alt-right, the mob is the movement, right? You've got a lot of different groups, and you've got the trolls from 4chan, which would be us. You get, you've got the Stormfronts and the David Dukes. You've got the Gamergators, the Vox Day people. You even got, the Manosphere, Return of Kings types. As much as I hate him, Roosh V identifies as that. And you've still got the paleo conservatives and the libertarians, the Ron Paul people, the Pat Buchanan people, the Stephen Molyneux of the world, as well as the conspiracy theorists, because the Alex Jones people, at least they want to pretend to. And I guess I'll include anime Nazism in there as well. So you've got this whole universe that, there is no specific leader of the alt-right. There are perhaps leaders within the alt-right, but no one can really claim to speak for the whole thing. If I could just finish a point here, because you made a pretty solid claim that we don't have an ideology or leaders. We certainly do. And because as I said, the mob is the movement. It kind of did. It totally was a grassroots thing. It formed organically, but you can track down and see, okay, well, here's the core tenets of the alt-right. Foundational to all of it is anti-Semitism or counter-Semitism, as you prefer, but understanding the Jewish question, understanding that it's foundational, and the solution to it is foundational to really, fixing the problems that we find ourselves. Establishing white countries for white people in countries that have historically been white. Scientific racism, understanding that the idea that all races is equal is pseudoscience. Opposition to feminism, gender equality, support for traditional families, endorsement of white history, cultural normalization, trying to stop degeneracy and degeneration through like drugs, pornography, that kind of stuff. And then common sense economics, understanding that, and I think we hit on this a little bit last night, but there are reasonable solutions to a lot of our economic problems, and a lot of that does have to tie into the JQ. You have to understand that there's a globalized white struggle, and that's foundational to it, although people disagree on that. Those right there are the core tenets of the alt-right. So when you say that, there is no ideology and that, well, David Duke disagrees with you, so therefore you're wrong, I think that that's just very disingenuous to say, because we do have very important points, and we've been out there making them for, 4, 5, 6 years now. So, no, we do have something that we're fighting for, and we're fighting for something that's a lot more revolutionary than what you guys are fighting for. We actually fight for something that means something you guys for Sargon's ego after he lost to Spencer.
All right. So first of all, you would have to actually believe that what you're fighting for means something in order to be a part of the movement. Second of all, you start off your statement by acknowledging that most of the people don't share your personal views, but you also, in the same breath, said we have a common set of tenets. Because the only common thing that I've noticed in all of the alt-writers, because I have been debating alt-writers for a long time now, is that they just don't. They only care about white. They're white identitarians. That's the only common thing in the entire deal. And the problem is that you're going to end up having the difference between the people who hate Jews and hate black people and actually do not want them ever in the group, and the people who don't hate black people and don't hate Jews and just want white people to have a say and to not
Yes, we call that the difference between the alt-right and the alt-light. There are people out there who attempt to appropriate some of our popularity but they'll still cuck on issues relating to race and the JQ. And while they may be friendly, we call them alt-right because no, they don't fully embrace our tenets, so they're not alt-right.
So once again, that the problem is that you're going to have the inevitable problem of having this group of fringe, non-true believers, and I think Richard Spencer is one of those.
Does Richard Spencer disagree with anything that I just said?
I don't think he does. No, I don't think he does. But I don't think he wants to follow through with it. I think once again that he is an alt-right salesman. He wants the commission off of selling alt-right.
So what's wrong with a guy selling something he doesn't believe in? If I'm in that movement and the guy's a good salesman,
what I'm saying is
probably didn't believe in half of what he did, but he was a great president.
He take over and he ends up trying to be the puppet leader. He's going to get shot in the back of the head.
Well, yeah,
he's going to get Trotsky.
He support. I mean, okay, if you want to hear my straight take on Spencer, and I've met the man a couple times, I think he's a good person. I think he does mean well, but he's also advocated for some very serious degenerates in the past. He argued for the inclusion of Milo. And oh God, who's the guy? Jack Donovan, the guy who wrote The Way of Men, who said that he fucked men in the ass like they were women. So yes, Spencer's not great on the homosexual question. I don't like when he said, homosexuality is the last implicit stand of whiteness. I think that he's useful for a lot of what we're saying. I think he certainly polished up his image in the past a little bit. But no, when we do take power, yeah, he probably will be one of the first to go.
All right. Thank you for establishing my point. But also, I don't understand how you think that your movement would last more than 3 generations.
Well, when America was established as a white ethno-state, it lasted for well over 100 years as a white ethno-state.
But it wasn't. But there was debate the entire time whether or not people were treating black people wrongly.
Well, I think that you're just fundamentally misunderstanding the history there. Even Lincoln, who freed the slaves, didn't think that they should have integrated into white society. He wanted them gone. That doesn't
validate anything. That doesn't mean that there weren't people out here who thought that slavery was immoral. There's lots of writing from that time.
Slavery is immoral, but so is having black people in our country.
Well, like I said, there are plenty of people from that time who would disagree with you. And the thing is,
nobody in 1860 was saying we should have a multiracial society. Nobody, even the liberals of the era. John Brown, the most radical abolitionist,
I guarantee you, some ass backwards jabroni who was sitting there saying we should have a multicultural society. And just because somebody didn't write a book doesn't mean it wasn't being said. Because it would.
Can I hop in for a second, guys? We're getting kind of bogged down into ethno-state stuff. This was supposed to be a liberalistism cast.
I think it's fine that because we have to compare and contrast our ideologies. I mean, the alt-right is truly revolutionary and new thing, and the liberalists are LARPing is that certainly, but I do think that a contrast needs to be drawn. So, I mean, with your permission, I'd kind of like to continue down this line. If he wants to continue questioning the ethno-state, because unfortunately, I don't think there's a whole lot of meat on his side to dig into, because how can I dig into any of those 7 core tenets and say, democracy?
Well,
okay,
actually,
fair enough.
If you want to, I can actually try to demolish your entire ideology right now if you want.
If you're going to demolish a 2-word summation of what we believe, then I doubt you can.
No, I'm talking about your principles.
So, yeah, what is this 2-word summation that you're talking about?
Huh?
What is the 2-word summation that you're talking about?
Communist Judaism.
Okay.
No, I was saying each one of the things that I listed off was just a summation of a larger, I think.
Right. But they're tenets most people grasp. ANCAP, why don't you go ahead and do your examination?
Sure. So first, hardcore. Do you admit before that your movement is in fact political because it's just
no, it's cultural?
Are you saying by your argument, every movement can be seen as cultural, including the alt-right?
Yes, but some movements are cultural and some movements are political and some movements are both. It isn't a mutually exclusive idea to have a cultural movement or a political movement. See, the thing is like Black pride and stuff like that is a cultural thing, and it's also a political thing.
You said your goal is to have political change, therefore it's a political movement.
No. Our goal is to have societal change. We want
Which is politics.
You fucking said earlier that you can't achieve your goals without some political change. Are you just changing
yes,
your mind?
but politics. But why would you change politics? Would the goal be only to change laws or to change the society that doesn't have free speech?
Laws change society. Laws are society. When
There
you change
you go.
one, you change the other.
So we would have to end up changing a few laws and get some more rights put into place before we could actually change society.
So I'm just curious, and I'm sorry for preempting you, Ankit, but I really wanted to ask this because this was asked of V earlier, and he didn't have an answer for it. But how would you advance your goals? I mean, politics is violence. Did you envision some sort of protest movement in the streets of people advocating for your stuff? Are you guys going to be in cloakrooms, manipulating like the Illuminati? I mean, how are you going to enact your goals here?
I would say that it just depends on what goals you're talking about. Like, it would be
your stated cultural political goals.
I would say that one of the first things that you would have to do is have the group get big enough to where you could sit there and back. You know what a lobby is?
Yes.
Okay. So a lobby is inherently a political, but it's also like a business thing, right? And basically the lobbies go together and have a bunch of different like people who have money who want to advocate for a certain thing, right? So in theory, it would be very similar to that. But it's instead of advocating for corn subsidies, we would be advocating for freedom of speech.
So that's what liberalism's end goal is to establish a lobby on K Street.
I mean, if you're going to make a basic bitch summation of the entire thing, then yeah.
Do you not understand why I think it's so important to draw a contradiction between our ideologies?
If there was one company trying to maneuver or a group of companies trying to weasel the system, it would be one thing, but hopefully, inevitably, it will be enough people to where you could really would you really, honestly, tell me this right now, would you really have a problem if everywhere in the world had freedom of speech?
Could you start that over again, but begin with but Richard?
But Richard, would you honestly have a problem where anywhere in the planet didn't have freedom of speech?
I honestly don't give a fuck about freedom of speech. I think it's useful. I think it's important for where I live. But do I care what the political policy is in Saudi Arabia? Not really. Do I care that China represses its dissidents? Fuck no. It's probably good that they do because they're a stable country that we can do business with. They keep security in that region of the world. And if they have to run over a few college kids with tanks every once in a while, it's not going to keep me up at night. So honestly, I don't give a flying fuck. I see utility to it. Now, I have values in my own country that I want to see, but other countries are what's called sovereign in that they can do whatever the fuck that they want. If they choose to, as a society, not have freedom of speech, okay, cool. I don't care. Doesn't mean I'm going to do any less business with that.
That doesn't mean that other people don't care. And the thing is basically what the problem I see with the alt-right is that I don't honestly see, and Richard Spencer said that in the little hug fest that they had on Andy Worski, I honestly don't see why y'all are trying to stand in our way.
Sorry, can you say that again? You cut out for me.
Butthurt bunch of people realize that they don't have the monopoly on disenfranchised white males anymore.
Oh, because you guys are the new up and coming thing, and you're stealing all our recruits. We're just mad about it.
I think we're stealing all the non-racist ones.
You guys have what? Like maybe how many people do you have on your Reddit? Like 50, 100?
I have no.
I don't think anybody takes you guys even close to seriously as a political movement. I mean,
that's fine.
We elected a guy president. We have a fucking body count. You guys have a subreddit in the Discord.
Yeah, I'd like to hear hardcore. Do you have an actual estimation of the number of liberalists?
Not right off the top of my head.
Okay.
That would see the problem. The problem is that would take in account like the multiple different Facebook pages, Twitter.
You realize most of the guys on your Facebook are our guys, right?
I do it, and that's the other weird thing about it. It's like I cannot figure it out. Y'all sit here and y'all pretend like y'all aren't a bunch of scared little children trying to like maneuver your way out of some boogeyman fantasy that the big bad Mandingo is going to steal all your women. And it's so freaking sad to see you try to infiltrate a movement that literally is just trying to advocate for silly things like freedom of speech and personal.
Wait, freedom of speech is silly?
No,
Isn't that one of your core tenets? Why would you call that silly?
I was being sarcastic.
Ah, okay. Well, here's the problem: is you think that we're coming after you because we're like deeply threatened by you guys, and we're like, oh my god, we got to stop these liberalists. I think V kind of had this syndrome a lot, where he's like, oh, they're coming at me because it's political. No, dude, people come at you guys because you guys are cringy as fuck. We infiltrate your shit. Funny because we're a bunch of bored dudes in our 20s and 30s who think, holy shit, these guys are a bunch of lol cows. Let's get some fucking laughs at their expense because it's really funny. So when we go on to these, oh, we all deny the reality of race, but then we count that you have like 98% of the people in your Facebook groups are white. That shit's hilarious to us. We get a lot of kicks out of it, but does it mean that we're afraid? No, it just means that we think you guys are cringy and funny and we laugh at you. And I think it's the same issue that V had with Medicare. He doesn't understand that people laugh at you just because you're cringy.
ANCAP, did you want to jump in there? I thought I heard you say something.
Right now, no.
Okay, sorry.
I think it's ridiculous that you don't understand that there are people out there who share your skin color who don't give a fuck about your skin color. I mean, if you look at all the damn SJWs, if you thought for 1 second that you were anywhere near the amount of people who compose the just normal conservative people who don't hate black people, and then all the cringy SJWs, progressives, normal liberals, you're like nothing. And it's ridiculous because you just admitted that you're a bunch of bored children who have nothing better to do in your lives but go and infiltrate basically a free rights movement.
Well, okay, I don't say that we have anything better to do, but like I don't pay for cable anymore. So yeah, sometimes I get my kicks on Facebook. I'm sorry I don't watch UFI TV, and sometimes I get my kicks out of watching people act like retards on the internet. I think that's why most of us are here right now, to be entirely honest.
Yes, we should take you seriously. That's exactly what should happen.
Well, as opposed to your movement, which is literally just composed of, literally it came about because Sargon got so butthurt about the Murdoch video that came out that he had to kind of retcon an ideology, which looks like a 4-year-old read the Declaration of Independence and then had to scribble a summary of it. I don't see any actual thing even besides the idea that we should be, because what's the difference between your movement and the YouTube septic community? Because it basically seems like when you guys realized that nobody gave a shit about the SJWs anymore, and that you kept doing the same thing for 3 years, and people moved on from, wow, she's got blue hair and feminism, oh God, this is terrible. You want to talk about people being scared? I think you guys are fucking terrified of us. I think you're absolutely terrified of us, and that's why you guys won't say anything besides, oh, you're right-wing SJWs now. Why is horseshoe theory constantly getting hit on? You guys are just trying to replace your enemy that everybody got bored with a new and fresh enemy because we're what's fucking popular. We are the counterculture, and you will never be the counterculture.
See, this is the funny thing about you is that you don't understand that you're bouncing all over the like sides. You're sitting here on one side saying that we're actually scared of you and that we're worried about you, being big and bad and whatever. And then on the other side, you're saying that you are like 95% of our group and that you go and you bug us just for shits and giggles. Honestly, most of us don't want to bother with you. And that's why
I don't see hardcore. I don't see how those are contradictory statements.
You don't see how those are contradictory statements?
Saving the white race is my goal. Messing with retards is just my hobby.
Can we continue on with ANCAP's line of questioning? Do you mind?
Yeah, please. I'm sorry for derailing like that. By the way, if I could just say real quick before ANCAP says anything, I see that we've got some liberalists in the chat. I do want to thank you guys for being good sports and showing up for the debate. It's always good to have people from every side represented. And thanks again, Hardcore, for being a good sport about tonight.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That's awesome, really.
All right. So first, I think we'll admit that you are a political movement, even if you don't like that term, I guess because it's bad optics. But in the end, the goal later on eventually is to change
just like
laws.
One is not 10, one is on the way to 10. We are one. not 10.
Whatever, you don't like the word, but that's what it means in the end. So
Okay, but that's the problem is that you're about to sit here and try to straw man based off of a word that doesn't apply to what we're talking about. See, this is the really dumbass fucking bull sad fucking tactics that all of y'all use. Is you sit there and you try to establish this line of semantics, like, okay, everything is the same until we're going to start and making our statements, and then we're going to use the words that we want to use in order to frame you in a certain way to where you sound like you're impotent.
Well, this is a good point to kind of do that, right? So we have this contention. It's not cultural, it's not political, it's cultural. Mm-hmm. And what NCAP is basically saying, what I'm hearing is it's sort of needless splitting of hairs. And what you're saying is there's a distinct difference, right?
In America, it very much is a needless splitting of hairs.
Okay, but internationally, there's a distinct difference between cultural and political, is what you're saying?
Oh, the cultural? No, I think it is like I said, the difference between. I think that if you're sitting here and you're talking about the way that people feel culturally, like here's a good example: is America. People identify as an American, right? That isn't an ethnic thing. That's not a racial thing. Like I identify as an American. I identify as a Texan.
Hardcore, explain to me why the differentiation is relevant.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to get into here.
The differential is relevant because of the fact that you can sit there and have two random individuals who are Republican and who are a Democrat. Those are political parties who can have liberalist values. That's the difference.
I don't think anybody really understands what you just said. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit?
You don't understand that politics are based around the idea of government and society is based around the idea of people? Okay,
that's sort of your central contention on the culture versus politics thing?
Is that we want people and not politicians? Yes.
You want people and not politicians. Okay. Fair enough.
I literally listened to you say that, and I can't make fucking sense of it. I'm sorry.
I personally, I'm a little confused. I don't know how ANCAP is.
I think I get what he's saying. This is what Hardcore is saying is that liberalist principles do advocate for political change, but they're not endorsed by any one political party because they're pretty wide and can't be summarized that easily, right? That's what you're saying.
They endorse for political change if it's towards the aims of getting the principles. Like, here's a good example. Is that
no, I get it. Again, you're just agreeing with me, right? So it doesn't fall directly in line with, for example, neocons or neoconservatives, but certain politicians do advocate for the policies that you like.
I would say that if you were going to put us on a spectrum, and this
I think that most of you are already on the spectrum.
But that's funny. If you were going to put us on a spectrum, and like I said, this doesn't apply to me specifically, but the group itself, I would say that it's what used to be the left in the 90s. Whenever you had people who still believed in freedom and stuff like that, but it wanted things, like, I don't know, hippy dippy things like equality for everyone and, societal freedoms and things like that. It's about advocating for freedom and not for morality.
Okay. I think I agree with the comment here saying this is just semantics, but you do agree that eventually you want policy change to occur in accordance to your liberalist principles, right? So you want policy changes. This is not even a big thing. This is a very small thing, but you can't even give that for some reason.
It's only if it is in line with the idea of the liberalist principles. So if you were to sit there and say, we want the UK to have a fundamental right to freedom of speech, and you were to change the policy for that, then the liberalists would support a policy change.
But they wouldn't take any part in initiating the change, or they would just wait for somebody else
They would just stand there and jack off in the corner while somebody else did it.
Hang on, let him respond.
How do you think that the system we have right now is supposed to work? Because
I think that the system right now, which incorporates many of your principles, has already fundamentally failed.
Let him finish what he was saying.
He asked a question. I was responding.
Actually, I didn't finish because y'all seem to be disconnected from the idea that you can call up your representative. You can call it. I know it doesn't seem like it works, but that's kind of the concept. Is that if you were to sit there, here's another good example. Is like, you know how whenever an SJW decides they don't like something, they go to the advertisers, like as a group, they just mob up on the advertisers.
Oh,
And
like
Sure,
how after the England Sargon debate, the liberalists got baked. Alaska's channel kicked off YouTube because they didn't like how badly Sargon looked at that debate.
I think that's probably a controversial
as
contention.
far as I know, the liberalists didn't do that at all.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Let's continue on with what Hardcore was saying, because I think we were getting into the meat of it a little bit.
I got distracted.
Now, this is actually kind of pissing me off, Hardcore. You're trying so hard to avoid saying that you want to advocate for political change, and I can't understand why. What you're talking about, talking to your PM, talking to your local representative, and asking him to affect his politics. Whatever you want policy change. Why do you not want to admit this?
I just literally admitted that if you were talking about giving the UK the right to free speech, and somebody was advocating for giving the UK a constitutional right to free speech, then the liberalist would support that person. That is the only way that the liberalists are political.
Yeah, so you want those changes to occur.
Yes, we want free speech in every country and every nation in the world.
Okay, good. Finally, we got that out of the way. Whew. Okay, now I want to get to the meat of the question, which is the liberalist principles. So I'll try to read off the first one. So individual rights. Protecting the rights of the individual must be the highest value of society, to foster mutual tolerance and respect towards the cultivation of the dignity of every person. So do you fully agree with that one?
Sure. But once again, it doesn't matter if I fully agree with it or not. I'm not the only liberalist.
Okay, but do you not understand how vague that is? Because is characterized by people's rights interacting and hitting, oh, my rights are going to be trampled by this guy's rights, and that there is a value judgment that has to be made at every level and constantly in all sorts of different contexts between people's rights and putting a priority in there instead of just saying, oh yeah, my rights.
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
I understand. Yes, society is complex.
Yeah, it's fine, but you're here representing your interpretation of liberalism.
No, what that is a difference between collective rights, as in group rights.
Do collective rights not matter? Do collective rights not exist?
I mean, they do, but they don't matter as much as the individual rights.
Sorry, so Hardcore, what are you here to do if you're not here to protect your own version of liberalism? You said you're not here to protect your interpretation of liberalism.
Kayfabe.
There are different interpretations. I would say that everybody has their own interpretation because we're all individualists. That's the point, right?
Everyone.
Well, so,
okay.
I mean, that's I think one of the reasons why people make fun of you guys, because you're this collective of individualists. I mean, that's inherently contradictory.
Apparently, a collection of individuals who can't even agree on the liberalist principles, right? That's what you're saying right now.
It's like a herd of cats, honestly.
Well, okay, so then why do we want to model a society based on what you guys want? Because you guys can't even run your own movement. How can we trust you to run a country?
That is the opposite of what we want. We want to have individual rights for more people, like freedom of speech. I mean, I don't understand what you don't fundamentally understand.
Okay, my issue is that your arguments for individual rights come up against my group rights as a white American. I think that it's really shitty that people, especially you liberalists, deny the idea that whites have any rights in this country, that we have a right to exist as a distinct ethnic group, that we have a right to continue to exist as white, that we have, you were talking about Black Pride earlier. Black Pride is seen as a positive thing. Oh, it's a great cultural thing.
So
hang on. Is that a contention of the liberalists that what Joachim was saying about whites?
I see the weird thing I don't understand about that is what do you mean by white people have the right to exist? Because there's two weird things that I think about whenever you say things like that. It's like, if there aren't enough white people, are we supposed to start mass producing them in order to meet a quota that meets?
No, it means we're supposed to have countries that we're allowed to live in and not be forced out of.
Yeah, but the thing is that I don't understand why you think that. I understand why you are reacting the way that you do towards progressive politics and things like that. but I don't understand why you think that the reaction is to do the exact same thing, but actually use the white crayon instead of the black one or the brown one or the yellow one. You know, it's weird to me because it seems like y'all just want to be SJWs and they just don't want to let you in the club.
For everyone watching bingo at home, playing bingo at home, horseshoe theory. Cross that off, everybody, because that is horseshoe theory right there. And you know what I call it? I call it horseshit theory.